Today's guest speakers will share strategies, resources and stories that highlight the importance of mental health and wellbeing in education and care services. I note that some of these stories are actually coming from local educators and local services, and I think that's something that we always highlight and like to hear from those working in the field and actually engaged in our local jurisdiction. So that's lovely to see. And thank you to those people who have done that. The National Quality Framework reinforces the critical role that education and care services play in child, educator and community mental health and well-being. The safety, health and well-being of children is paramount and it's the first objective of the National Quality Framework and is always a priority. We also know that educators are at their best when their well-being is supported as well as their professional practice. And this is especially important given the recent COVID-19 hailstorms, bushfires, etc. It's been quite an amazing year, as I know you all know. So it will be good to hear about how people are coping and to learn strategies to help us to cope. Before we hear from our guest speakers, I'd like to introduce Sean Moisey, Executive Branch Manager of Early Childhood Policy and Regulation, and he will provide us with an update on behalf of Children's Education and Care Assurance. Over to you, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and welcome everybody today. The story of the last 10 months for our sector is a story about resilience and support. December 2019 saw the beginning of one of the most challenging periods for all of us living in the ACT. And from February 2020, the beginning of one of the most challenging global periods in the 21st century. Staff, services and providers continue to work, continue to support children, continue to support families from the time that the fires became an issue in late 2019. Continued through the worst of the fires, continued through the impact of COVID-19, continued through the ever-changing navigation of restrictions and financial pressure. The story of the sector is one of resilience through those changes and challenges. And the story of every person keeping the sector functioning under extreme circumstances is also one of resilience. And the story of every educator turning up to work with children through this chaos is one of resilience. And the results are that there are children who are safe, developing and thriving despite the circumstances of the last 10 months. Just going to get the right slide, there we go. By December 2019, bushfires in southeastern Australia had taken hold. As early as 9 December 2019, health advice was issued regarding the smoke. And from that time on, living with and managing smoke was our days and our nights. As a community, we learned about the measurement of smoke particles and health risks caused by smoke. Learned quickly about particles in the air, and our media and phone apps shifted to monitoring smoke and weather patterns. We lived with the horrible conundrum that a good air day for us was a bad fire day for communities southeast of us. And that experience lasted into late January and early February. On 20 January, the ACT experienced a heavy storm with damaging hail. For a number of services, this added an extra burden of stress and cost. While the fires and COVID had taken up much of our focus, I think it's important to say that the hailstorms did cause a great deal of concern for some services. Several services were damaged and had to close, so those services should be acknowledged for how they managed that event, the relationships with children and families, and recovery. On 23rd of January 2020, the Beard fire threatened services at the airport and a service was forced to evacuate at a moment's notice. Again, it's a credit to the leadership and staff of that service to act decisively and professionally to keep children in their care safe. And on 28th of January, the Aurora Valley fire threatened the south and southwest of Canberra, putting us all on alert for evacuation and direct fire management. Mercifully, it did not progress into the suburbs. All through that summer period, a very small number of services had to close, and only temporarily. On 30 January 2020, Seeka sent out its first advice to the sector about the risk of newly emerging COVID-19 virus. By 18 March, governments acting on health advice started imposing conditions and restrictions on movement and congregation of people. This began a long series of significant restrictions and measures to isolate the virus. In the last weeks of March, there was a national and local dynamic of attendance dropping, families unenrolling children. By the end of March, the sector was advocated for financial relief from the Commonwealth as income started to wane. The declaration of COVID-19 as a pandemic also negated insurance policies for income protection. The risk to viability of the sector rapidly became a critical issue as income dried up. The Commonwealth did respond, and on 6th of April, the Early Childhood Education and Care Relief Package commenced. Between 6th of April and 13th of July, the relief package in conjunction with JobKeeper aimed to support the sector's viability through the COVID-19 crisis. And to receive these payments, services are required to remain open unless directed to close by Seeka or ACT Health, and the service had to be free for families. Extremely low attendance at schools by April prompted the Education Directorate to develop remote learning and provide safe sites for school-aged children to attend from 28th of April to 3rd of July. A partnership was developed with a number of providers associated with the safe school sites to support all day staffing at those sites. The relationships and collaboration built through that time has been really positive. By July, the Commonwealth Government announced further changes to the relief package as the risk of COVID reduced in most states and territories. And JobKeeper ended for the sector on 20th of July. Since mid-July, weeks and weeks have gone by with very few COVID cases, meaning by August the ACT had moved into recovery mode. For most of this year, there has been national coordination of governments to deal with COVID-19 from the National Cabinet down. The Chief Minister and Minister for Education and Early Childhood Development advocated for the sector at National Cabinet and at Education Council, particularly on viability of the sector and the need for health advice tailored to the sector. Officers from the Education Directorate also participate in a range of permanent and temporary national bodies to organise and advocate as necessary. The deliberations were considered and informed and collegiate. In the midst of the COVID-19 response, we had a surreal moment of participating in a national forum on what we'd learned from the 2019-2020 fire experience and how we could better coordinate nationally. In dealing with the bushfire crisis and the COVID crisis, accelerated and concentrated some key conundrums on how the sector is financed and how the sector is regulated. For example, every state and territory regulator has a good sense of the sector's capacity to respond to emergencies, while the Australian government has a good sense of how the flow of income is going. We had to share information, data and strategies, and it showed that if we can do this in time of crises, we should be able to do it in better times. Financial stability and access to insurance are also issues that came to the fore. And of course, the response by families to free services was very positive, while the experiences of educators, services and providers to do that on significantly reduced income was very challenging. One of the standout insights of the national deliberations and the local experience was the importance of early childhood education and care. Early childhood education and care is now a community expectation and a necessary part for people's practical work life, and consequently also has a key role in economic life. During times of isolation at home, many parents had a clearer insight as to what their services and educators provide their children. I'm hopeful that some of these issues in the national deliberations will enable these conundrums to be addressed faster, and Seeka will continue to advocate that the sector should be consulted on any national changes proposed that affect the sector. As I mentioned when discussing national coordination, the fire and COVID-19 crises show that it's hard to get a complete picture of the state of the sector, given different roles of the federal and state and territory governments. And early this year, Seeka planned to do a set of 3 surveys to get the best understanding of the state of the sector, especially in terms of viability. On 15 April, Seeka initiated a sector survey on viability. 99 providers of early childhood education and care in the ACT responded to the survey, and 85% of providers responding stated that the viability of services remained a risk at that time, and 89% had reduced staff hours, and 37% had stood down staff. On 28 July, this was initiated. Sorry, this thing is gone. Just going to get the slide on the right. Slide. Oh dear. I am trying to get the slide in the right space. Carly, if you're there, I might just stop control, Carly, and if you could just get it onto the sector slide, please. I'll just keep talking. So 28th of July, we issued the second survey, and the focus of that survey was to access the transition back to the childcare subsidy and the additional childcare subsidy. And 5.9% of providers reported some change to staff employment levels between 13 March and 13 July 2020. 3.1% of providers reported an increase in employment, while 2.9% reported a decrease in employment. Out-of-school hours care services reported that the highest decrease of educator employment at 2.4 in comparison to long day care and family day care providers. Long day care providers were the only service type to report an increase of staff employment at 1.9%. In terms of enrolment of children, 77% of services reported a change in enrolment numbers since 13 July 2020. 65% out of school hours care services reported a decrease of enrolments, with the most common known reason reported being parents choosing to keep their children at home whilst working from home. 64% of long day care services reported the highest increase of child enrolments. Yes, that's right. And 80% of family day care services report an equal decrease and increase in child enrolments. A common theme identified by respondents were difficulties in recruiting staff, which restricts services' ability to increase child enrolments. The Long Service Leave Authority has also been able to provide data about employment turnover in a range of sectors, including our sector. And employment data for the second quarter of the calendar year recorded by the Long Service Leave Authority highlighted the impact of JobKeeper on staff retention. A total of 182 out of 5,434 educators ceased employment from the sector in the second quarter of the calendar year. This is considerably low compared to the usual number of cessations per quarter, which is around 700 to 800 people. In terms of data, we have the survey responses so far and the conversations we've had with providers, services, regional managers and service directors. We know that staffing remains a critical issue for the sector. We have a survey coming up planned for October. I strongly encourage all to respond to the survey, as it's incredibly important for understanding the state of the sector and to advocate for the sector's needs. And please accept my thanks on behalf of the team to those that responded to the survey. Next slide, please, Kylie. While this year has been one of crises and endurance, there are a number of really positive things that have happened. The first one I'd like to mention is that on the 1st of February this year, the 3-year-old initiative for access to early childhood education and care commenced. And this is an initiative for children who are experiencing significant vulnerability and disadvantage. The Education Directorate is working closely with Community Services Directorate and ACT Health to connect with children and families. So every child has been referred, has been offered a place. And the children referred are those who really will benefit from accessing early childhood education and care. I'd like to extend a warm thanks to the providers who agreed to be part of this inaugural year, and I'd like to encourage more providers to become part of this important program. The out of school hours care trial for 4-year-olds also commenced this year, and the aim of this trial is to develop better or best practice of providing out of school hours care for 4-year-olds on school sites. A warm thanks to those providers, schools and services who agreed to participate in that trial. Another positive for the year was the launch of the Early Childhood Strategy on the 31st of August. The strategy sets out a plan and a series of initiatives for early childhood education and care in the ACT for the next decade. The strategy was informed by extensive consultation with community stakeholders and the sector from November 28 to April 19. And I'd just like, Kylie, if you could just go to the slide about consultation. Kylie's just orienting the. Okay, we'll just wait for that slide to come up. I really encourage everyone to read the Early Childhood Strategy, and I also really encourage everybody to read the consultation report, which is on the same web page. I'll just talk about the themes. The slides are moving just up a couple. There, that one, thanks. So that's a snapshot of the consultation. It was a qualitative process. We got to talk to some people that we wouldn't normally get to talk to, and thank you everybody who helped facilitate that consultation, because a big part of that was engaging with the relationships that we had as an organisation with yourselves to get to the people that we really wanted to get understanding of their experience. So that was good. If you could do the next slide, please, Kylie. So these are the 4 themes of the strategy: fair start for every child, valuing educators, values children, every child has a story, working together for children. And you can see the narrative around those four foundations. And each of the initiatives fits somewhere in there over the next a couple of years and projects into the next 10 years. And the next slide, Kyle, if you could do that, is just the slide of where you'll be able to find the consultation report and a copy of the strategy itself. Finally, I'd like to talk about Seeka. And Kyle, if you could just move to the next slide. Thank you. From the moment the Education Directorate's incident management team was established for COVID-19, Seeka was a member of that team. And in response to the pandemic, the Education Directorate established a work stream responsible for monitoring and supporting the sector and doing whatever we needed to do to ensure continuity. The 4 streams of work were established. They were support, capacity, child safety and communication. Capacity was about planning for contingencies in the context where we didn't know what was. So that team was about planning contingencies in the context where we didn't know how, at the time, how fast and how deep COVID was going to go in terms of the spread in the community. And that team also monitored and analysed and advised on geographic and strategic location of services, workforce issues, size of essential workforce in the ACT, and suitability of potential premises. So that was really, and also working through how viability issues were tracking as well. The support team proactively provided advice and support where possible to education and care services and providers who are experiencing operational viability difficulties, assisting with application for waivers and enabling ongoing operations of the service. And I think as that team matured and we started to get a better sense of where COVID was going, provide a lot of support in relation to issues of wellbeing and engagement with families as well. Child safety, that team was all about upholding child safety in both in settings and community, and maintaining and strengthening communication and coordination with key child protection agencies in a context where face-to-face work is not. Thank you for that team, for that a lot of really challenging work behind the scenes. And communication, which all of you or most of you would have experienced, which is timely, regular and relevant communication with the sector through different platforms. A communication plan was developed to ensure that there was consistent ongoing communication to the sector in relation to the pandemic and any available assistance resources and guidelines to the sector that needed to be made available, and that work continues. And just to give you a sense of the communication that we engaged with, by the end of July, the support team had made over 500 calls to services, and there were 28 sector-wide emails that had important COVID information that went to 1,900 recipients on each occasion. Our webpage views reached a total of 4,792, and through our Facebook capacity, we distributed 282 posts with a weekly reach of 1,500 and a monthly average of 7,278. On 29 June this year, we commenced a recovery phase focused on support and commenced a graduated return to all of our usual regulatory functions. Colleagues undertook wellbeing support visits to services as part of the recovery plan, and the visits focused on discussing wellbeing of educators, children and families. They provide an opportunity for nominated supervisors and staff to talk about their experience across the COVID-19 period and the impact of this on themselves, children and families. In response to the many dilemmas faced by services and providers, we also published a video called Making Difficult Decisions, Choosing the Right Thing to Do to Move Forward, which was presented by Catherine Hayden and Dr. Kate Highfield. Soon after that, Seeka published a special edition of Talking Quality, highlighting extraordinary things services were doing to cope and respond to the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. I thoroughly recommend having a second watch and read of those two publications. They are really inspiring. I'd like to acknowledge and thank my colleagues in Seeka for their work this year. As a team, we've solved so many problems and we've proactively, consciously reorganised ourselves several times. I think the experience showed that time and time again, the team worked really hard to understand what was happening with the sector and to support the sector. I also acknowledge the enormous physical, mental and emotional toll that this year has had on colleagues in Seeka and everyone in our sector. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Sean. If anyone has any particular questions for Sean, if you'd like to publish them in the chat function on your screen. So if you look at your icons, it should be the second one from the left. So it's a little comment box. So anyone's welcome to put any questions there at any time during this morning's session. So Sean, perhaps I could start by asking you, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for the sector over the next 12 months?
Thanks, Claire. I think there's two challenges, I guess, responding to anything that might happen with COVID. You know, we're learning so much about how it works and the significance, and obviously everyone's watching what's happening in Europe and the United States. So I think that's a psychological challenge as much as a practical one. So trying to keep ourselves in a space where we can deal with potential changes there. I'd have to say we are extremely fortunate that we got a good handle on it for the ACT, and touch wood, he says, touching his head, that we don't experience, you know, that again. I think the equal an equal challenge for the sector is staffing, and that's, I think that there's a conundrum there. Has it been exacerbated by COVID? Is it just an accelerated, you know, experience we've gone through, and we go through this cycle anyway? So staffing is an issue, and you know, that's something that we're looking at nationally. There's a national workforce strategy that's being developed. I think there's some material on the Seeka webpage, but we can look at where you can find that and put that out. But yeah, there are a lot of minds thinking about how do we deal with the workforce issue. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Sean. And what are you most excited about in the coming year?
Ah, that's a good question. What am I most excited about? I think there is enough. So a lot of the research around early childhood, I think, is becoming accepted, and the challenge is to put the research into practice. So we know the research is there. I'm extremely excited about a lot of new relationships that are evolving where we're doing this together. I think that's a really positive thing that's happening. I can see a lot of positive relationships happening, and to a certain extent, some of the barriers about understanding the impact of early childhood seem to be coming down, which is great. And there's an important conversation to have around, you know, where, how can we? What is the best way that we can work together for the benefit of children? So I'm excited about that. I'm kind of excited that there is the prospect that there's light at the end of the tunnel for COVID. I'm also excited, this may sound strange, but I'm excited that COVID's actually given us different ways of doing things and different ways of working that can actually be highly inclusive too. I'm also excited about the cultural integrity work, and Wendy mentioned a bit of that, and I totally agree with Wendy's comments that there's some really positive things happening in terms of cultural integrity, and yeah, that's a couple.
That's great, Sean. Thank you very much for that. And one of the pillars of the early childhood strategy, working together for children. Can you tell us about any of the work that's proposed in that area?
Well, it's a bit of a challenging moment because we are in caretaker, so I'm not going to advocate what might be a policy position of a party, but I do encourage people to look at the strategy. I think there is certainly a conversation that's being had across the board, whether it's in the ACT or in any other state and territory. If we think about the experience in South Australia, what's happening in Tasmania, what Northern Territory have been doing, there is a strong look to how do we think about, 0 to 8, thinking of things in way of 0 to 18. How do we think about, the common relationships that we have? And in the consultation, I talked about the public consultation today. We did have a consultation internally within ACT government, and it's really, between ourselves and Community Services Directorate and ACT Health, we have very strong common ground in relation to needs of children. We do different things in relation to those children, so how can we work together better that it's actually more of a a community around supporting children in that journey and their development, rather than separate silos or separate boxes. So those themes are there.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for the branch for leading us through such a difficult start to the year. So, Wendy, if I could have back to you, please.
Thank you, Claire. And thanks, Sean. I think people will be quite excited to see the early childhood strategy out there, and it will be very interesting to see how those 4 foundation pillars develop over time. I do advocate for people to remember to respond to the survey that will go out in October. All of this information does help us significantly in understanding what's going on in the sector, and from that understanding, hopefully be able to help and work together with everyone that's out there. I want to highlight the reference to resilience shown by the sector across the last 9-10 months. It's testimony to what we know is out there. I mean, I've been in the sector for many years, and I cannot think of a sector in our community that is more adaptable, more resilient, and more there for one another than the education and care sector. So Well done to everyone out there. So now we're moving on, and we're now going to hear from Dr. Catherine Hops. Catherine's an educator, researcher, and a consultant. She's a practitioner. She has a practitioner background working in a range of education and care settings, has research expertise in transition to school, and is an adjunct research fellow at Charles Sturt University. Catherine currently works for ECA as a BU consultant, supporting education and care settings across Australia to implement a whole learning community approach to mental health and wellbeing through the BU initiative. Our colleagues Anna and Sarah from Flynn Early Childhood Centre will also be part of this presentation. So well done, Anna and Sarah, for being there as part of who we are. And Catherine's BU colleague Tanya will also be supporting attendees in the chat function. So Catherine, can I hand over to you, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Wendy, for a really lovely introduction. As Wendy said, my name's Catherine and I'm a BU consultant at Early Childhood Australia, and I'm here with my colleague Tanya, who might just pop her camera on there so we can see Tanya in the background. Hi, Tanya. So Tanya will actually post some web links to our resources in the chat box there. So you might like to copy those links and follow up with them later on. And also for people watching this recording, as you won't be able to access the chat box, if there's anything you'd like to follow up with us, please contact us and our details will be provided on our final slide. So we know that to date that actually over 130 education and care services in the ACT have registered for the BU initiative. And this is amongst the highest percentage in the country. So let's celebrate that. We'd also love to see many more join us, as we have capacity to support every education and care service in the ACT and surrounds. So today I'm just going to run through some introductory information about BU, and also talk about educator wellbeing. And I'd really like to assist you to take some first steps with getting things going in a whole of learning community approach to mental health. And it's fantastic we have so many services that have made a commitment to mental health by registering with BU. But what will make a real difference to the mental health of the entire community is when every educator and service takes some beginning steps to learn about mental health, to critically reflect and take some actions, no matter how small they might seem. And because I'll only be able to provide an introduction, Tanya is going to pop a link to an expression of interest form in the chat box now. So please pop your contact details on this form if you'd like more information about BU, including how to register your service, as well as any follow-up from the information provided today. So we've been able to have a lovely BU table at previous sector meeting events, and this expression of interest form is kind of our online version of that BU table, where our BU consultant will be able to give you a call and have a personal conversation with you if there's something that you'd like to know. Thanks for that, Tanya. Yan Yiramboro. Hello and good morning. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm standing on Ngunnawal land today and pay my respects to the Ngunnawal elders past and present, but also the children and young people who will be elders of the future. I'd also like to acknowledge in this public space that the source of my knowledge of the Ngunnawal good morning greeting that I use is Richie Allen, and thank Richie for sharing his cultural knowledge and language with me. I'd also like to say and acknowledge that there may be people that are joining our online meeting today from other lands. Maybe you're on the lands that surround Canberra, Nerrigu, maybe it's Wiradjuri or Gundungurra land. I'd like to pay my respect to the elders of those lands. So if you wouldn't mind finding the chat box, the conversation box there, and popping a little acknowledgement to the traditional custodians of the land that you're on today, that will be our way of acknowledging. We also like to acknowledge country at the beginning of our presentations, because there's actually a really important connection between reconciliation and mental health. And so when both children, families and educators can experience a sense of cultural safety, being proud of who you are and where you come from. This is really key for experience of positive wellbeing. And here at BU, we actually have a suite of resources to assist learning communities to consider Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives on wellbeing. And this suite of resources is called Always BU, and you'll see some of our symbols and graphics from Always BU in my slides today. And Tanya's going to pop a link in the chat box, thanks Tanya, to where you'll find our Always BU resources. And this is one of our Always BU symbols on the slide now. This is Make Safe. So in this presentation, I'm drawing on this particular symbol to talk about self-care and how to keep yourself safe while having conversations about mental health. So today we'll be talking openly about mental health, and it's a really important, that is actually a really important thing to do to break the stigma associated with mental health issues. So if anything in this presentation today upsets you or reminds you of past experiences, please do what you need to do for your own self-care. So that might be stepping away from your device, taking some time for yourself. And if these things continue to worry you, I really encourage you to talk to someone. Identify people in your network that you trust. They might be in your personal network or professionally, and have a yarn with someone. Tanya's actually just popped there also the Beyond Blue support service phone numbers there, because there's also some really important local and national phone lines that you can talk to someone as well. And I also encourage you to explore or ask whether you have an employee assistance program available through your service. So please feel free to share with us today in the chat box. We like to try and encourage interaction, and we will be engaging in some reflection, but Make Safe is also about feeling safe not to share. So we encourage you to share your reflections and thoughts and comments if you'd like when we prompt you to, but also feel okay not to do that. Or you might share with colleagues that are beside you, might prefer to do that, or just reflect on your own. And if you're looking at a way to begin BU, simply using this Make Safe symbol and having a conversation at your place about how do we make our place a safe place to talk about mental health. This is actually a really strong starting point for learning, reflection and action around mental health, and a really important strategy if you are going to engage in a whole of service approach to mental health. So up on the screen here now is our vision. So BU, and it's kind of going back to what Sean was saying, BU is actually a single integrated national initiative to promote mental health from birth to 18. So it's actually a leader in a lot of ways because it is a birth to 18 framework. We are all about a consistent and continuous approach focused on mental health and wellbeing. It is actually for every Australian educator. So regardless of the setting that you work in. So from early learning services, school age services, primary and secondary schools, and also future educators as well. So pre-service educators. It's important to know that BU is actually a partnership. So you'll see on our slides various logos. So BU is actually led by Beyond Blue, but it's done so in partnership with Early Childhood Australia and with Headspace. So Tanya and I actually work for ECA, and it's our role to provide direct support to early learning and school age care services, but also schools who are wanting an early childhood focus on wellbeing, and we support them to implement BU. So you may be familiar with our website, and we've got a stack of resources on there, but actually behind the scenes, there's a team of BU consultants who are actually allocated to services, and we support you to implement. So our vision on the screen there is that every learning community, so that's an inclusive term to mean early learning services, school age care services and schools, every early learning community is positive, inclusive and resilient, a place where every child, young person, educator and family can achieve their best possible mental health. And so at the heart of BU is actually a framework, so a birth to 18 framework that provides a structure for both professional learning, but also reflection and action that you can take to implement a whole learning community approach to mental health. A BU is federally funded, and a question we're often asked, is there any cost? There is no cost. It's a federally funded initiative through the Department of Health and Beyond Blue. So wherever you are in Canberra or surrounds, or indeed across the country, you can access BU and the consultant support. And consultants like myself and Tanya, we support, we advise and we mentor services in growing a mentally healthy community at your place. BU is also a sustainable initiative, so it's not about one-off PD. It's actually about learning, reflection and action over time and sustaining and embedding those actions for the future. So this vision on the screen here is very grand, and it isn't something that can happen overnight, and especially can't happen from engaging in, for example, one-off professional development. This is why we're here, to support you over time, to grow your services capacity to support wellbeing, not just in times of crisis, but for every day, now and into the future. So why do we need an initiative like BU? Well, I think 2020 has really highlighted why we need a whole of community approach, whole of learning service, whole of community, whole of Australia approach to trying to impact mental health outcomes. So on the screen there are 5 dot points with really our goals, and you might relate to some of these goals. If you're a service that's already engaged in BU, there might be one or more of these that really brought you to BU as a pressing reason why you wanted to register. But you might also relate to some of these goals in terms of what you're trying to do for your learning service. So BU really strives to promote the development of mentally healthy learning communities. And so yes, it is about supporting children's wellbeing, but it's also about supporting the wellbeing of educators and families as well. The second point there is about fostering partnerships with families and community. Now, this is part of the National Quality Standard, and we know that partnerships with families are really important, but actually what BU helps you to understand is that actually those partnerships are a protective factor for children's wellbeing, and actually really important to impact a generation of Australians with their mental health, that we work together with the key adults, all the key adults in children's lives, increase their mental health literacy and their knowledge and their skills and their capacity to support children's mental health, but also their own. The third point there is about building educators' capacity to teach skills for wellbeing and resilience. I think one really important point is that BU isn't just about assisting children or colleagues with mental health difficulties. It's actually about building positive mental health for everyone. So, and not only with that building capacity, it's skills, it's knowledge, but it's also confidence for educators that they know what they can do to help. And they know what they can do every day in their practice that builds protective factors for children's wellbeing. The fourth point there is about guiding educators to support children and young people experiencing mental health issues. And we do have a lot of statistics around how many mental health issues and conditions present themselves before the age of 14. So there's an absolutely pressing need that educators know how to identify and respond and refer children who may be experiencing mental health issues, and also understand the boundaries of their own role and what it is their role to provide support. And the last goal there specifically relates to the part of our domain which is called Responding Together, and it's about supporting communities back to mental health following a critical incident. So this year, this has been a particular popular part of our framework for services to engage in, particularly around the bushfire crisis and with COVID-19. So part of our role is to support services to develop a critical incident management plan, which you will have things like how to respond in the immediate, short-term and long-term to support recovery. And this is actually, perhaps at this time of the year, this is a really good stage to be thinking about this. And having those plans in place, and the things that you've been doing this year, you might want to incorporate into a formal plan of how to respond in difficult circumstances in the future. So I'm actually going to invite some reflection and sharing here now. So on the screen here is a little prompt, and it says, when I think about mental health. I'd really like you to take a moment to reflect on what are the first things, the first words that spring to mind when you think about mental health. And so I'm just going to pause for a few moments to let you do that. And if you feel comfortable to share, we'd love to see some responses there in the chat box. So what are the first things that come into your mind, the first words that come into your mind when you think about mental health? Hi, Tanya, would you like to share some of the responses in the chat box there?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say we've got some great responses coming through. Mindset and resilience, support, cup filling, which is always one of my favourite terms as well. Sometimes not coping. Sometimes we're seeing the stress. It's that other end of the continuum to mental health.
And what are some of the first things that come to mind for you, Tanya, when you think about mental health, having worked for you for a while?
I guess being in this space for quite some time, and we talk about mental health each and every day, and you've touched on it a little bit in what you've been saying. I really think about what's around us in terms of protective and risk factors, and they can be very small things that we may not notice during the day that are a protective factor that kind of fill, as someone said, fill our cup. And give us that resilience to be able to cope, and maybe recognizing sometimes what are our risk factors and how can we maybe minimize those or provide support for somebody to help minimize their risk factors.
Yeah, thanks. I really like Wendy's just shared in there a few words: fun, belonging, freedom and empowerment. So in particular, belonging and empowerment are some of the underlying I guess notions that underlie BU as well, and we actually have a whole module around empowerment. It's really important, agency and empowerment, particularly for children, but also for educators and family members as well. Great, thank you, Tanya, for sharing those. And so this is a really important conversation to have with your team, actually, because it's important to know where people are coming from with their understanding of mental health. With one of the aims of BU about raising mental health literacy, it's really good to acknowledge where we're all at, sort of at the beginning. And around breaking stigma, there's some really important learnings that you engage in with BU, and things like we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. And mental health exists on a continuum. So at one end of the continuum is good mental health when we're feeling well. In the middle is kind of where we might be experiencing some signs and symptoms of needing support and needing to do something for our mental health. And at the other end of the continuum, that's where there are mental health issues and conditions. And for all of us, in any given day or week or year, we go up and down on that continuum. So if we can promote this understanding of mental health widely in the community, we can actually help to break the stigma. So it's a really important one to share. And Tanya's actually popped in the chat box there a link to the BU Mental Health Continuum. And that understanding that mental health isn't mental ill health, but unfortunately you will see a lot, particularly in the media, it being portrayed in that way. So when we take this perspective that mental health exists on a continuum with positive mental health at one end, mild and moderate symptoms at the other, and mental health issues at the far end, we can really promote that understanding. And first in BU, but at the same time, if educators become comfortable over time with this idea and also share that learning with families as well, this can go a long way to breaking stigma around mental health. Thank you very much for sharing, and that might be something that you'd like to take back to have a conversation with your team. up on the screen here now is the definition of mental health in early childhood that we use here in BU. So just like all other areas of learning and development, mental health begins at birth. And that idea that infants and toddlers have mental health is something that we really need to promote in our sector, but also with families as well. And mental health and wellbeing is related to healthy physical, cognitive, social and emotional development. And it's actually essential for optimal development, learning and growth. And what a child experiences in early childhood development, particularly the relationships and the skills that they learn within those relationships, this contributes really strongly to a person's mental health, both during childhood and in later life. So if we just draw our attention specifically on early childhood mental health, this is the capacity of a young child within the context of their development, their family, environment and culture, so we always need to consider that context. Mental health is a young child's capacity to participate in the physical and social environment. It's also their capacity to form healthy and secure relationships, experience, regulate, understand and express emotions. Mental health is also about understanding and regulating their behaviour, interacting appropriately with others, including peers, and developing a secure sense of self. And this process continues throughout childhood and adolescence and into adulthood. So Tanya's mentioned there about risk and protective factors. Another key learning in BU is around risk and protective factors and learning what they are. And then also as educators and services, knowing what it is we can do, particularly in relation to building protective factors. You'll see that in our framework. Most of it is to do with your role in building protective factors and also recognising when a child needs extra support. The next slide here is really an illustration of the whole of community approach and why it's really important that we don't just have individual educators engaging in professional learning on their own about mental health without actually having a whole of service approach to that. Because at the end of the day, we'll make the biggest impact on mental health outcomes if everyone is essentially on the same page. Everyone has a really good understanding of mental health, risk and protective factors, the mental health continuum, and what is our role, and what it is that we do in everyday interactions with children and colleagues and families that supports mental health. So we've got on the diagram here individual educator learning, and that is important that individuals engage in professional learning. But we really need to take that then to collaborative activities, uniting and engaging all educators. Coming together, it might not even be physically coming together. There's lots of different ways to do this, to reflect and have conversations about BU content, for example. And then deciding together, and we saw lots of examples of this in the wonderful Talking Quality publication that Sean referred to, things that you actioned in your services to support wellbeing. And you did that for the whole service, that whole learning community, whole service and school actions and strategies. This is where we'll really start to make a difference. So BU is built around this approach. And it's really important to create sustainable change in your service to do this together. And that's one of the beauties of BU is that you don't necessarily need to release staff altogether to engage with our online tools and resources and consultant support. There are many ways to engage in BU. Here's a quick look at our framework. There's more information about this on the website, but I like that it's really in a circle there because it's about having a mental health lens on everything that you do. And for example, seeing children's behaviour through a mental health lens and responding, for example, through trauma-informed practice or really good early childhood practice that we know is beneficial. So I did want to talk briefly here about we like BU not to be another thing to do. So it really supports you to achieve what you're already trying to achieve. And that could be through your services quality improvement plan, or other plans, goals and visions that you have. It also connects really well, and we've done a lot of mapping around how it connects with local, state and national priorities. Tanya's just popped in the chat box there. I've written with ASEQA actually a blog post about how BU can support exceeding NQS themes, and I've supported some services to do that, and there's some service stories in that blog as well, so thank you for posting that. And so you'll see if you've got goals in your quality improvement plan, they might be in relation to supporting children's self-regulation. Well, BU can assist with that, learning about what is self-regulation, how do adults support children to self-regulate emotions and behaviours. If that's in there, BU can be a strategy to help you achieve that. If critical reflection is in your QIP as an area that you'd like to work on, BU is all about critical reflection on practice and changing practice, and then continuously reviewing that. And in relation to the ACT Government's Early Childhood Strategy that Sean mentioned before, BU can really work well to help the ACT achieve what it would like for children and young people. So in relation to enhancing the workforce and the qualifications, BU can assist to build the knowledge, skills and confidence of both individual educators, but also teams of educators in their roles supporting mental health and wellbeing. It can be part of transforming practice in education and care services in the ACT and improving quality. In addition to this, the actions that services and schools take in creating a mentally healthy community can actually increase the attraction and retention of educators. Mentally healthy workplaces where people are happy, it's a place that people want to work and they want to stay, and they feel that the rewards outweigh the challenges. So it's also important to know that BU professional learning modules, which you may have seen, are TQI accredited. And also in the early childhood strategy, there's mention of trauma-informed practice. If you'd like to begin some learning about trauma-informed practice now, you can start that with BU today. And it's also a way to engage your whole staff in learning about trauma-informed practice as well. In the strategies as well, there's transitions are really important. So we know transitions, big and small, are really important for mental health, and they're much more than simply orientation and enrolment, practices, school readiness, and the exchange of information. As Sean referred to, very important about everyone working together. So they're about relationships and connections over time, and BU can assist in critical reflection on transitions and how we all might work together for the benefit of children. We have a range of fact sheets on transitions, and we also have a module called Connect. And we also have transition expertise within our consultant team. This is just a very quick look and an attempt to capture what's in an enormous website in one screen. So if you're a registered service, a really easy way to come, and even if you're not, if you'd like to just come and say hello, we do national check-ins almost every day of the week, and it's a really time efficient way to come and learn about some of the resources and tools that we have. Many people will be familiar with our modules. We've had lots of people doing those, particularly in localities where there has been lockdown and not every educator has been working in the service, but we're much more than just professional learning modules. We've got fact sheets, we've got handbooks. Importantly, for registered services with us, we've got planning and implementation tools. And I'll just make mention of one in particular. It's called the Reflection and Implementation Toolkit. It seems that, particularly from reading the Talking Quality publication, there's lots of things we've done this year. And as Sean referred to, it's been a real opportunity to think about how we do things. And so that reflection tool, you can do a self-assessment of where you're at with supporting mental health and identify where there might be gaps and opportunities for improving practice. Without further ado now, though, I'd like to move on and introduce Sarah and Anna from, I'm just skipping over a slide that shows you we do actually have an implementation process if you'd like some structure around a whole community approach to mental health. You can read a bit more about this in our handbooks. I'm just going to flick to the next slide. And I'd really like to welcome Sarah and Anna from Flynn Early Childhood Education Centre, who are going to share with us today their BU story about how they get started, some of their successes and plans for the future. Thanks, Sarah and Anna.
Thank you, Catherine. So my name is Anna and this is Sarah. And we're both from Flynn Early Childhood Education Centre. I'm the service educational leader and a teacher, and Sarah's also our assistant director and a teacher too. Before we start, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today. We would also like to pay our respects to elders past, present and future. I'd now like to pass it on to Sarah, who's going to talk about how we started our BU journey. Next slide, please, Catherine.
Thank you. So we actually started our journey at the end of 2018. We were having conversations about how we can have mentally healthy conversations about mental health, and wellbeing, and we wanted to put it in our critical reflections as a part of our quality improvement plan, and just sort of have it as a bit more of an everyday conversation, not something behind closed doors. So what we did was we actually ended up starting our BU program in the start of 2019. We started by inviting our teachers and educational room leaders to start the program first, but there was no stress. It wasn't us telling them what module, and our light went off, or what domain to do. However, it was more about getting them to choose which one that they wanted to do. Maybe it was something that they chose for themselves that suited their own personal needs, something that they thought would benefit families, children, educators in the community. So we sort of left that up to them because we wanted it to be more meaningful and not just, as Catherine was saying, not just something that you do and then that's it. So what we did was after they did that, we sort of wanted them to have time to do it. We didn't want them to rush. So you know how like at the start of a day, there might be 15 or 20 minutes before you start morning tea or in the middle of lunches, there's a little bit of a gap. We get our educators and our teachers and educational room leaders to go off the floor for a little bit, read a couple of paragraphs, and when they come back, they can just have those conversations and sort of share that knowledge with each other. And then after they do that, after they got comfortable with the program and they'd started the modules, we got them they could share their knowledge in a variety of ways. So they could either do it in a room meeting, and BU have these great handouts, great resources. So we could print those out and share them with the educators as well. So they could do it in room meetings. They could do it with in their critical reflection books. So we've got personal ones or room ones. So they had a choice of doing that as well. Or even just in conversations on your lunch break as a family comes in, sort of sharing all this amazing knowledge that you've learnt. And yeah, I'll pass it on to Anna for the next slide, please, Catherine.
Thank you. So we were lucky enough to have Bridget, our BU consultant, who was very supportive and knowledgeable. There was no push to get things done in a set time frame, and she was very flexible in asking to meet at a time that suited us. Bridget guided us in every step of the way as she listened to our ideas and supported us in moving forward with the program. This year we were assigned Susan, who has been proactive in sending us learning events regularly to extend on our professional knowledge and development, in particular during the pandemic. It has been lovely to have such knowledgeable and caring BU team who are always there to support us at any time. Next slide, please, Catherine. So once our room leaders and our teachers, once they became comfortable with the program, we wanted to sort of start sharing this in a bit more of a visual way. So what we did was we created a BU wall. We've got these large, lovely walls at Flynn, and we used one of them to create a BU wall. So as you can see with our first picture here, we started off with mindfulness. And BU has all this information, so this literally just came from them. And we just created our own little posters, added it there. And it has like, what is mindfulness? How can you practice mindfulness? And what are the benefits? So we started with that. And then next we got our rooms, all the rooms, we've got 7 rooms here to create posters about how they practice mindfulness in their rooms. We wanted to show families it wasn't just something, that adults do, but like babies all the way up to preschools, anyone can practice mindfulness.
I can see the slide straight away as soon as I got in
their own ways.
When you got in, how did you get in?
Sorry, I think someone's just got their mic on. Thank you. So then after that, So once we had done that and we'd sort of shown how we practice mindfulness here, we had some post-it notes and we asked our children, families, community to write down, or we could help them write down how they practice mindfulness at home, because we recognize there are so many different ways you can practice mindfulness. And we wanted to not just share our ideas, but we value everyone else's input as well. Next slide, please, Catherine. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're moving forward. The majority of our educators have now completed their BU training and they're now mentors to staff and students. We will encourage these new staff and students to complete the BU online training, as we know how valuable this is to their ongoing health, their wellbeing and their professional development. Another thing that we want to do is to start creating BU folders, and this will contain information for the staff to use. And we hope this information will be valuable for providing links and documentation and programming and curriculums, as well as being a reference when supporting others in the Flynn community and themselves. Overall, we have found this to be an inspirational program, and we encourage all services to sign up for BU and see the benefits for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna and Sarah. It's really beautiful to hear your passion and enthusiasm for supporting mental health at your service. And what I really like is that you've engaged with families in learning and reflecting on what we can do to support our own mental health through mindfulness. So this is really important, and I encourage services when they are learning, it could be through BU or another initiative, that you actually share that learning or even learn together with families and highlighting those different aspects around mental health. So that's fantastic. And in particular, I really like that you mentioned babies and mindfulness, because we do know from parent surveys in Australia that a lot of people don't understand that infants and toddlers have mental health. So it's that promotion alone is really significant. So thank you very much and best wishes with your BU journey.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
So we're moving on to the second half of the presentation today. It might just be a little bit of a chance to have a stretch and a wiggle here. So now I've introduced you to a little bit of information about the BU initiative. We're going to turn our attention specifically to the wellbeing of educators. And Sean has mentioned that this is something that has been, I guess, in the spotlight this year. It's something that we've always valued as being important, but because of the multiple challenging circumstances the country's experienced. But if we think about here in Canberra, in terms of at the end of last year, beginning of this year, many educators themselves impacted by bushfires and ongoing implications of the smoke in Canberra. And then, of course, we had the pandemic and the severe storm somewhere in between. I actually plotted this in another presentation, the timeline of what happened in Canberra in relation to, for example, when children started school, and to actually see it in that way, to understand this has been the experience of our educators as well as families and children. So while we're creating a positive mental health environment for children in our services and schools, it's also important to focus on your wellbeing and that of your colleagues. And it was great to see in the Talking Quality publication lots of initiatives around supporting educator wellbeing. So in a mentally healthy service or school, everyone's wellbeing matters. There are many ways to begin BU, and one way a lot of services and schools come to us is actually because they want to improve the wellbeing of educators. So that is one way that you can start this initiative. And today, again, very quick introduction to how we can support you to implement BU around educator wellbeing, but Tanya will be posting some web links, and it's certainly the focus of a lot of our online professional conversation spaces at the moment. And we've been hearing about what services all over Australia have been doing, and our real concern at BU is to make sure that we embed and sustain everyday practices to support wellbeing, not just during difficult times. And so, while Sean referred to there's been an opportunity to do things differently, we'd really like to encourage you to pop into, even consider having a staff wellbeing policy as an ongoing way of how you will embed supports for your educators. before we go any further, I'd just like to provide a moment for everyone to just check in with yourselves. And there's some reflection points on the screen here. And these actually come from the BU self-care poster, which Sarah and Anna actually had in the background of their webcam. It comes with the registration pack. So it's encouraging sort of staff to check in with themselves every day, perhaps when they arrive or leave the service, or during the day as well. So I'd just like you to take a moment to notice these things. How are you feeling? So it's essential that educators and also support people in supporting roles as well, I would like to say, to look after themselves, because so that you can actually do the National Quality Standard, to actually be able to provide warm and responsive interactions with children, for example, to be able to provide an emotionally as well as a physically safe service or school, we need to have happy and healthy educators. And, you know, to be able to do very complex work with children and families, and also think of this year to be able to cope with the changes that we've had to, and interpret the information and all that sort of thing. It's been really important that we look after ourselves. And the other, one way to think about this is that what's happening in the broader context that children are in impacts directly and indirectly on them. So the mental health of key adults in children's lives impacts children's wellbeing. So it's really important to be able to do our roles that we take care of our own mental health. But in saying this, I've got someone, need to put mute, thank you. In saying this, I'm going to be very intentional to say that I'm not just saying educators need to look after themselves, that self-care is both an individual and a collective responsibility. So it is also the responsibility of organisations and of education systems to look after their educators. And we know from research that the wellbeing of children is tightly linked to the wellbeing of educators, and actually quality is. So quality early learning and school age care and school programs require healthy and happy educators. And we know that the quality of services, and you'll see if you go into our resources, we actually identify quality as either a risk or protective factor for children's mental health. So high quality services are known to be a protective factor, whereas poor quality services are a risk factor. So this is something that we can do to impact the mental health of our community, is to continually strive for high quality services. Also, to quote from some other research as well, we know that educators who are experiencing stress, anxiety and distress may find it difficult to develop relationships, particularly with children whose behaviour is challenging. But also these children are the ones who are most in need of support. So research has found that poor wellbeing of educators actually reduces educators' belief that they can help children with emotional behavioural difficulties. So we do actually know that this is very tightly connected. And this is important to consider in the context of natural disasters and also COVID-19 pandemic. Educators who are stressed and distressed have a reduced capacity to support children, particularly those most needing our support at this time. Here's a few points I'd love for you to take away from this today, and that looking after yourself isn't selfish. Okay, it's actually part of your responsibility to children and to provide a quality service, and for your colleagues. So looking after yourself is important for your own sake, but it also affects the mental health and wellbeing of children. And that you do play a role in supporting the professional resilience of your colleagues and of yourself. And we can really focus on things that we can do to build protective factors for ourselves and our colleagues as well. And it's really great to think explicitly about what are my strategies and plans to support my own wellbeing. At BU, we can help you with locating, if you'd like to do self-care plans for yourself and your team, we can let you know where you can download some ones that have already been developed, and also in developing your own. So, and promoting help seeking is really important amongst your team as well, to normalise help seeking for mental health as well as physical health. So identifying with staff, for example, 5 people that they can talk to if they're experiencing difficult feelings. And I'd love for you now to share, just while I'm talking, I'd love for you to share what is one thing that you have done in 2020 to support the wellbeing of your team. We heard about some of these things in the Talking Quality publication, but I'm sure there's been a lot more. No matter how small it is, it could be really significant. So I'd invite you to share in the chat box there, and Tanya might read those out in a moment. What's one thing you've done to support the wellbeing of your team this year? I'll keep going here, and I'll pause in a little moment to read out if anyone's shared there. So back. Oh, yes, Tanya.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we've just got one quick response. Peeled back expectations for the team. Yeah, and I think that's really great, because it's sort of seeing that we can all just take a moment, take a breath, and be, rather than sort of always be looking to the what's next, what's coming next, and giving us all a chance to relax a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that personally and professionally, there's times where it's really important that we have high expectations of ourselves and others, but particularly during challenging circumstances, it's a really good self-care strategy to really be realistic in expectations of yourself and of your teams as well. So that's a great one. And we've got Flynn have shared there, we encourage staff to still take leave, even if it's just a day for themselves. It can't be understated how important that is, that taking regular leave. And even though, there's been that, well, we can't go anywhere, can't go on holidays, just taking time to be and having that leave is really important, and stopping thinking about work as well. Putting some boundaries around it is really important. And Lyndall's popped in there, lots of encouragement and acknowledgement and of adaptation. I think that's really important, Lyndall, because sometimes just acknowledging what's happening and how hard it's been and speaking about it can make a massive difference. And that's, opening up those conversations can actually really help people. Tanya, did you want to read out a couple of the others too?
Yeah, we've also got someone that's popped in. Engagement with pre-service educators has assisted our teachers to reflect on their practice and evaluate their sense of moral purpose. Helping others helps ourselves.
Absolutely. So we see this a lot through the various gratitude initiatives that they have, but really, and being in a helping profession where we help others can bring those rewards of making a difference. So often we're all here because we actually want to make a difference, but reminding ourselves and focusing on the positives of what happened, even if it's the tiniest moment of a baby reaching up to you when they've woken up from a sleep, and really savouring those positive moments can actually help, increase the rewards of the job, because we've had so much challenging and negative to deal with. Our brains, I think naturally go to that, but if we can focus on that. So it sounds like in Wendy's team, helping others, helping ourselves, really reflecting on that role can really build your well-being.
Definitely. And we've also had another somebody else say that too, that it's about being in the moment, and I think that was definitely touched on as well, and it's so important.
And I like Lee's put in there the element of fun. It's really important to have a little bit of fun at work, and this could be finding out, from your educator team, and also strengths, like finding out things that they enjoy and trying to actually build it into the work day, as well as times where we might do fun activities as a team. But if they can be incorporated into work, we know that also increases workplace wellbeing. And puzzles and games and in the staff room, having a bit of a staff room revamp, to look, is it, a nice wellbeing space is fantastic. Wendy's put in there, reminding people that experience emotions deeply is part of being human. It's okay to be sad. And I was just reading something last night about when we practice gratitude, for example, it's also important to acknowledge the other side of that. I'm grateful for, but also at the moment I'm challenged by. I've got mixed feelings. I am really thankful for my job and for coffee in the morning or whatever it is, but also I'm having some difficult feelings about other challenges at work as well. That all feelings are okay is so important. If we can just make a difference in that space for each other and also for children, we'll be making a massive difference for mental health, that all emotions are okay and mixed ones at the same time are okay as well.
Definitely.
Thank you. Please keep sharing in there. I'm going to continue on, but because way back when Sika invited me to present towards the beginning of the year, it was in the context of natural disasters, and it's really important to remember that the recovery is long term for the communities. And of course, we have many people in Canberra who were affected directly and indirectly by bushfires. We looking after yourself in the event of a natural disaster. We've got a fact sheet here, and actually a lot of those things are relevant in the pandemic as well, that things that you can do for you and your team. So I encourage you to hop on our website and have a look at that. I also want to make mention that BU received some additional funding from the federal government for a bushfire response program. And so we've employed additional people as contact liaison officers. And so and their role is there'll be some trauma-informed training, but also they'll support you in a recovery plan. So in relation to the Canberra community, and you might have already heard about this program, you might have been contacted directly by us. If you're a service in the ACT and you are supporting families, children and educators who are impacted by the bushfire crisis, and you would like some support around a recovery plan, please contact us through our Contact Us page and request support from a bushfire response program contact liaison officer. So that's probably something that's not so well known about, but it's another sort of addition to BU. So yeah, there's lots of tips in this fact sheet. I haven't got time now to run through them all, but they're really good to reflect on. And also remembering that bushfires and natural disasters are part of the Australian experience. So the planning for support and recovery from these is needed in an ongoing way. And it's a good sort of time now, while we're not in that type of situation, to think about, and it's about recovery in terms of mental health. So there are particular things you need to do when a critical incident impacts your service in terms of regulatory requirements and responsibilities. But this is about recovery, short-term, long-term, and immediate recovery for mental health in your service. Just got a screenshot here from our website, and there's our website address here. So right on the landing page, you'll actually see that we have a coronavirus and mental health suite of resources. And there's one for early learning services and there's one specifically for schools. So we've brought together a lot of authoritative, and I know one of the challenges was lots of information being sent around to support both from bushfires and the pandemic. So we've pulled together some of those really good ones into one resource, so you can access that there. And we've also got on our website there resources around bushfires and mental health as well. So encouraging you to hop on our website and have a look at that, and also recognising that recovery takes a very long time. So there's things that you do immediately, short term and long term as well. So you can keep coming back to these resources, and they'll also help you, to build a mentally healthy community in the current circumstances, but also into the future as well. And this brings us to our final slide. just to say thank you to Sika for inviting us to talk. I'm really delighted to be here, and BU is always here, but it's really come into its own this year. If you want to do something to make a difference for the mental health of your service or school now, and also start to think about things for the future, we're here to support you. If you'd like to register for BU, either as an individual or your whole service or school, the registration link is the first one on the screen there. So once you register as an individual, you can actually request through your dashboard, we want to become a BU learning community and make a commitment to supporting mental health. Also, Tanya now has posted again that expression of interest form, which is kind of like our how we're trying to replicate the BU table over at the Headley Bear Centre. If you pop your name and contact details, Tanya or myself or one of our consultant team will give you a call to have an individual conversation with you about what you might like to do with BU at your service, and we can assist you with registering as well. Now, for the 136, I think it was last time I downloaded the report, 136 education and care services in the ACT who are already registered. If hearing today has made you think, yeah, actually, we'd like to get started, come to one of our national check-ins. It's a conversation space with myself or Tanya or one of our consultants around implementing BU, but also around various mental health topics. They're not a presentation, they're actually a conversation. And this is where you can benefit both from expertise available locally to you in Canberra, but also nationally as well by coming to those online spaces. If you've got a question for our team, there's our BU contact. I'm also, you're quite welcome to email me directly and I'll help you. But yes, at any time you can get in contact with us. That contact us is it's also where if you want to request support from the Bushfire Response Program, that you can request that as well. But I'd just like to say thank you everyone for your interest in making a difference in mental health. Thank you for Sika for such a wonderful meeting themed around mental health and wellbeing. We're here to support you to grow a mentally healthy generation, and please be in contact with you if we can help you. I'm happy now to take some questions.
Catherine, we've just got a couple of general questions from Leah in the chat box. There's a really good one that often we gets asked from educators when they're contacting us individually as BU consultants. What can I do if I see an educator stressed or overwhelmed?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So part of becoming a mentally healthy community and being, using our Make Safe symbol, and once you start breaking that stigma around mental health, you will have people either coming directly to you to confide in you that they might be needing some support with their mental health, or you might see someone, be more aware of people being stressed or overwhelmed. So it's very important then to build skills and confidence in what do you do. It's kind of great. I love the Are You OK initiative because it's opening up those conversations, but you also need to know what to do if someone's not okay. So in BU, we actually have a process to help with this, and it's 3 sort of easy steps. It's called Stop, Reflect and Act. So you've noticed that someone seems stressed or overwhelmed. It's really important to stop and make time to ask that person how they're going and if they're okay, and to pause and really listen. And you don't even really need to say much, but actually just providing that time for someone to talk about how they're going could actually be helpful in itself. So the first part is stop. So the next part is reflect. So if you open up that conversation with an educator who seems stressed and overwhelmed and they do confide in you, it's also a good point to make that they may not feel safe to talk to you at this point, but you've actually put it out there that you're happy, that you've noticed, and that's a really good strategy to explain. I've noted, even if you say I noticed that you seem a bit stressed and overwhelmed, can I help you at all? So actually saying that's really helpful. With the reflecting, if they do raise some concerns and worries with you, just that reflecting is about, okay, is this the right time to talk? And there are some concerns there, to really acknowledge and say, this is, I can see this is a really hard time for you. Would you like to come with me into the staff room, or outside, or of course making sure that there's appropriate supervision being provided. Just reflecting, is this the best time actually to have this conversation? It's really important. We might just move that to another space, or would you like to catch up with me at the end of the day, or can I give you a call? But also reflecting is about knowing your professional boundaries as well, that you're not a counsellor, but it is important that you open up that conversation. So in terms of what you might do next. And the next part is acting. So stop, reflect, act. So there's many ways to act to respond to help this individual. One thing that's been raised there by people, actually participants here, have said about acknowledging feelings and experiences by simply saying, I can understand that's actually really hard, and that you are feeling really stressed and overwhelmed because there's a lot going on. So just that acknowledgement is also what we do for children as well, acknowledging the feelings and emotions. You might offer some practical support. Someone shared there about encouraging leave. So saying, oh, look, there's a lot going on. You've got actually quite a bit of leave available. Would you like to take? And I'll make arrangements for cover for you next week. So offering some practical support, whatever that may be. Can I help you with some of the tasks that you're doing today? And yeah, offering that within the professional boundaries of your role. It also might be encouraging that self-care. So it's, what are the things that you do that help you to feel better? Who have you got that you can talk to? Really encouraging that self-care. Promoting help seeking again. So really encouraging and normalising. It's really great that you started to talk to me about this today. I'd really encourage you to keep talking. Who are the people that you can talk to? And also the other thing is then it's following up and following through. So if you can continue to be concerned about that particular educator, that you do follow up and follow through with any practical support that you offered, but also asking again if they're okay as well. I hope that that's been helpful. But certainly a really important one, that everyone knows how to support someone who they are maybe feeling stressed or distressed at work.
Thanks so much, Catherine. I don't know if we've got enough time just for one more question. Leah's just popped in as well. How can we support families through publications from BU? And this is something that we often also talk about with many services wanting to share the information that they're receiving and upskilling themselves in this knowledge around mental health with families. So I'll pass it over to you.
So we do, BU is for educators. You'll see very much the language is that. However, it is written in language that anyone can understand. So feel free to share any of our stuff with families, but it might actually be you want to take it could just be a sentence, like that's what I've been trying to say, and taking that sentence and using it either in verbal conversations or in your newsletters. Some of our fact sheets have been developed to be appropriate for the family audience as well. So, and you can download and print some of those. But there's also some fantastic mental health initiatives that are aimed at educators. So, for example, I'll just point out that Beyond Blue has a Healthy Families website. So that information there is really tailored towards families. But I think sharing the small snippets from BU as you're learning is a really powerful way. If you're really explicit about we're engaged as a BU community, this month we're learning about risk and protective factors. Some of the ways we build protective factors here at our service are, some of the ways families can, and you just take that information but pop it into, I guess, a really easy to read and practical form. I do want to actually mention the German Australian Play School in Canberra has actually made off their website, and thank you very much to Lucy, and I'm just missing the name of the director of that service in my mind right now, have actually developed mental health pages on their website for families around resilience, around mindfulness, and have actually shared some German language expressions that they use in terms of encouraging children and acknowledging their emotions. So even innovative practices like that are fantastic for sharing mental health information with families. Anyone want to jump in there? Tell me who this daughter. I feel so embarrassed. I've forgotten. Lisa. It's Lisa Stephen. That's it. She might. Thank you. Have a look on their website and see how they've shared mental health information from BU with their families and tailored it to their particular context. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the time, but please, if there's any more questions that you want to pop in there, Claire will send those through to us later to answer. And thank you very much for having us, and I hope to see you at some of our online events in the future. Thanks, Tanya.
Lovely. I really want to thank you most sincerely, Tanya and Catherine, for that presentation, and also Anna and Sarah from Flynn for adding their wonderful practical example of the application of the BU in their setting. I especially am proud of the fact that we have such a good uptake with BU in the ACT, and I encourage people to continue to access and build on that. I especially also like the way that Catherine brings together all of the different aspects of education, the education and care landscape, your references to the standard, to how you can use BU in QIPs, our publications and the strength of those publications in promoting wellbeing, and the importance of quality. Like, as the person who leads up the quality assurance team here at Children's Education and Care Assurance, I advocate madly and wildly for that. And that really does bring us into our next presentation. Just before we have a small break, Jessica Annerly, who assists me as the Director of Quality Assurance, will provide a quick overview of the CEQA's updated Exceeding National Quality Standard guidance. So Jess, take it away.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Good morning, everyone. I am Jess, one of the Assistant Directors of the Quality Assurance team alongside Wendy. It's just a very brief update from me today on some work happening around the National Quality Standard, nationally and at a local level here in the ACT. So you will have recently received an alert from CEQA with updated Exceeding National Quality Standard guidance as part of their commitment to promote consistency, reliability and transparency in quality rating decisions. Informed by sector feedback, the guidance includes more information about what each exceeding theme might look like in practice and across different service types. New resources have been developed, including a series of case studies that offer practical and illustrative examples of what exceeding national quality standard practice may look like for each quality standard. Updates to exceeding guidance on page 93. This includes translating guidance previously presented as exceeding indicators against each standard into reflective questions for service leaders, educators and other staff. A new resource for authorised officers on page 94. This resource is a series of questions which is known to authorised officers as Exceeding NQS Practice Analysis Tool, or the NPAT, for those of you who like acronyms. And this is to help determine if all exceeding themes are demonstrated for each quality standard. This tool is being used by authorised officers across Australia and is included in the guide to the NQF to offer further clarity and transparency for providers, service leaders and educators. I do feel it's critical to mention that this tool is what authorised officers are using nationwide to analyse the evidence that is collected while conducting an assessment and rating visit, to consistently determine if the evidence collected reflects meeting or exceeding practice against each quality standard. These updates and resources have been developed in collaboration with all state and territory regulatory authorities and are available on CEQA's Exceeding the NQS dedicated webpage. Now at a local level, the Quality Assurance team have recently developed and sent out a survey to all services that received a final assessment and rating report since February 2018. So the survey link has been sent to the service email address provided by services in the National Quality Agenda IT system. And just to reiterate, that is only to those services who have received an assessment and rating since February 2018. Now, the purpose of this survey is to help us understand how services are using their assessment and rating report and any improvements that could be made at a local level to our processes relating to the assessment and rating of services. So I strongly encourage you to fill that in. Please provide your responses before the survey closes on the 30th of September 2020. Finally, before handing back over to Wendy, I would like to thank the ACT Education and Care sector for welcoming us back into your services after such a tumultuous time to conduct our wellbeing support visits and recommence assessment and ratings. It's been such a delight visiting and hearing your stories of strength and determination over what has been such a challenging year. And we really look forward to seeing how these experiences will continue to shape your services moving forward, taking the learnings and reflections and supporting your continuous improvement. Overwhelmingly, the services that we've spoken to have got some positive things to share with us, and a lot of the time that's around how these experiences have brought their team together and brought their families together as well. So it's been really incredible hearing those stories and hearing the resilience of the sector as Wendy spoke about, and Catherine and Sean spoke about too. So I will now turn off my camera and mute my microphone and hand back over to Wendy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess, and wholeheartedly agree with that expression of the joy of getting back into services and hearing the stories. You will notice in the comment section that there's been a link put up to the German Australian Play School in Canberra's mental health information that they've been providing for families and community for anyone who was interested in looking at that. And also, I think there was also a link put up to the information about the Exceeding National Quality Standard guidance, if you're not aware of that already. Now, I know I'm really looking forward to the next session and hearing from the people from Northside. So I'm welcoming now Liam McNicholas, Lisa, Claire, Juliana, Mary and Abigail from Northside Children's Service, and also psychologist Beth McGregor. Northside Children's Services has been working with psychologist Beth McGregor for many years on supporting educators to learn more about trauma-informed practices. Beth McGregor is a psychologist who began her career in 1993 as a child protection caseworker. She's delivered training in child protection, domestic violence, child development, attachment, infant mental health, neuroscience, trauma, parenting, early childhood sleep, working effectively with vulnerable families, life story work, foster care, counselling, motivational interviewing, and conflict resolution. I look at that and I think, gosh, that looks like the director of a service. They're all of the things you've got to dabble into as a director of a service. But, you know, obviously Beth is going to bring to that much more knowledge than the poor old director has. But it will be interesting to see how that has supported directors in the Northside services. So Beth has worked with psychologists, social workers, counsellors, welfare professionals, occupational therapists. What page are we on? Mental health specialists, foster carers, doctors, nurses, educators from a wide range of government and non-government services. So I'm going to hand over firstly to Liam, and Liam will then work through the presentation with the Northside people and with Beth. Thanks, Liam.
Hello. It turns out I had to unmute myself first. Probably should have done that first. But I just want to say thanks, Wendy, and thanks to CCA for taking the big plunge into this virtual world. It's been fascinating to hear and listen to everyone, and a great way, I think, for people to share things in the sector. I just wanted to reiterate what I think has been a really good theme of the speakers so far, and just add my thanks to educators, both here at Northside in the ACT and nationally, for the work they've done this year, and every year. I think it's very difficult to imagine that we're not going to come out of this year with a much stronger sense of how important the work of early childhood educators and teachers and leaders is, and the idea that we won't see, dramatic changes in how they're valued as professionals in the coming years. I really hope that that's something we do see. I get the really fun job now of just doing a quick intro. The people you're going to be hearing from today are educators and directors. And Beth McGregor, who we've had a really long professional relationship with. We're so fortunate to have Beth as part of our professional lives at Northside. We're going to be hearing sort of two separate presentations. The first one is around the Conscious Discipline Project. I don't want to talk too much about it because I want Beth and Abby and Lisa to be sharing that, but it's been an incredible, intensive professional development project for this year, and it has been the primary focus of our professional development at Northside. And it has continued through, a year that we were not anticipating would be the year we were going to have, but the fact that, educators and directors across Northside have not only continued, but really done some incredible work with this project is just amazing. And we're so grateful here at Northside that we have this incredible team to be working with. So the Conscious Discipline Project presentation will be Beth speaking with Abby, the team leader in the Preschool 2 room, and Lisa, the director at Harrison, about some of the incredible work they've been doing. And then after that, we're going to be keeping Beth and then having a conversation with some of the other centre directors at Northside about some of the specific reflective supervision work they've been doing. But I'm going to do a bit more of an intro on that as we go along. But I'm going to hand over now to Beth and Abby and Lisa, and hope we're all ready to log on. And we had hoped, we unfortunately the technology failed us a little bit. We were hoping to have an audio recording of children engaging in the acknowledgement of country. But Abby, it might be great if you could talk about the acknowledgements you do with children. But what I'll do is just acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Ngunnawal people, acknowledge the contribution of Indigenous people throughout the past and continuing in our community, and acknowledge any Indigenous people elders who may be here with us virtually today.
Thanks, Liam. It's nice to see you.
Hello, Beth.
Hi everyone, I'm Beth, just waiting for Abby and Lisa to join us.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you, but we can't see you. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Hi. Over to you guys. Kick us off.
So I think
Lisa's doing
click through. There we go. So Beth, I think we might start, if that's possible, by maybe talking about the background of conscious discipline in general.
Yeah, great. So what is this thing called Conscious Discipline? So Conscious Discipline is an American program. It's a comprehensive self-regulation program that, as you can see from the slide, incorporates social and emotional learning, classroom culture, and problem-solving skills. It's used in over 45 countries across the world. The originator, Becky Bailey, I love this. She says it helps educators spend less time policing behaviour and more time supporting children to develop the social and emotional skills they need to be successful. And she also says that it creates, and I think this is very powerful framing, it creates a mindset shift. So we really think about behaviour in a very different way, and our role in supporting children's behaviour. So it creates that mindset shift, but also a skills upgrade. So giving educators the skills they need to support children to be successful. It also is an educator first model. So it's about supporting educators to develop their own skills of composure and assertiveness and encouragement and other skills internally they can use for themselves, which is a very nice follow-on from the BU presentation, as well as teaching those skills to children. I first came across the program many years ago and have been supporting a number of USH services and other early learning services and social workers and other professionals working in early learning spaces to study conscious discipline for a number of years now. And I love it because it makes such a big impact. That's me. Lisa and Abby, what do you think?
Conscious discipline has helped educators access their brilliance and then pass it on to the children, like what you said. Yeah.
And I think for me, as the centre director, not only am I seeing a difference with the way educators are interacting with children in the rooms, but it's changed the way I interact with my educators. So I guess I'm using it from an adult to adults. They're using it from adult to children. So I think it's changed the whole dynamic of our centre.
Yeah, that's amazing, Lisa. So would you agree that those skills that we've been all learning and studying, you're kind of incorporating into the way you think about all relationships and interact across with your peers? And Abby, I noticed you nodding there as well.
Yeah. Not only with the children, with the educators as well in the room.
And probably with parents as well. Yeah. And it gives you I think it's given us different skills when engaging with parents, especially with those challenging conversations that you have with parents. That I've noticed a difference with educators with those conversations as well. They're not as scared to have them, and they don't come to me and try to palm them off to me first. They are doing it now.
What do you think's been the difference, Lisa?
I think this whole program has given the educators confidence, and also they have come through it knowing that they actually have all the tools. They just probably didn't know they did or how to use them. So I think it's just across the board, just using the tools that you have helped us get as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks. Abby and Lisa, did you want to talk through some of the slides so people can have some sense of what the project looked like?
Yes, so I'll start. So myself and the team leaders, we have a learning circle with Beth every month.
Just go back. Sorry, Lisa, just go back, Liam, to the previous slide, and the previous one. Thank you. Yep.
So we do learning circles with Beth every month after watching one of the webinars that we're currently up to. All of the other educators in the centre watch the webinars as well, and then they talk about them in their room meetings after the team leader has attended the learning circle with Beth. Yeah, so Abby can probably talk more about what happens when she goes back into the room with the educators.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Abby, just before you do, I'm going to interrupt. So just to give some context, so anybody can subscribe to a 12-month program where you have access to 10 online webinars and a host of additional resources, which goes through all of the skills and the other things that Conscious Discipline teachers, and so it's just a fantastic resource. So what's happening is that the Northside educators are studying Conscious Discipline by looking at the webinars from Becky Baylor, the originator, which are very interesting and entertaining, and then coming together, and we're meeting with Zoom to discuss their learning and discuss their reflection and discuss how to implement it. Over to you, Abby.
Yeah, and then after we attend the learning circles with you, we go back in the room, and we have a room meeting with all the educators, so we can talk about ideas, we can use strategies, and we also set our goals, let's say for the month, what we will implement in the room and what we're going to teach the children.
And I think it's important to say too that often Beth sets us
some
goals and we commit to things, and we challenge ourselves as well. So at the next learning circle, we can come back and talk about
our successes.
Our successes, because it's all about successes.
Yeah, exactly. So we begin each learning circle by reflecting on what successes have you had this month. And I am always absolutely blown away. I mean, like genuinely, really, really, to hear the stories of sometimes the very small differences that you're in the way you're interacting with children or the way you're working particular rituals or routines, and just seeing the transformation in the children. And what I'm sure we'll get there eventually, but what I think is something that really stands out for me is educators' confidence in using these skills are just keeps growing. And then the children's challenging behaviours just diminishes because they're getting the support that they need from the educators, and that's helping the educators' confidence grow. And it's just kind of success upon success upon success is what I'm hearing each month. Did you want to say anything else about that, Abby?
Oh yeah, I just want to add with what's different now for educators. I think educators now are seeing that all behaviors is a form of communication. So instead of judging the children, now we see them as they need something, they need help, and they need a person who is stronger, bigger, stronger, wiser, kind, to help them, guide them, and assist them whenever they feel upset, frustrated, they're down. Also, we now value the connections we make with the children, because we know these connections will then result to more cooperation and willingness from the children.
Yeah. And we studied that in the first couple of months, didn't we? Connection creates cooperation. We talked about that mindset shift. But I think what you're seeing from your experience is you're seeing the experience, the power of connection in creating that cooperation.
Yes.
Yeah. And what you're speaking to really is that mindset shift, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, it's not an idea for you anymore that all behavior is a form of communication. It's not just some idea. It's a very, very felt, deeply understood way of viewing and seeing children in the moment. What is this child trying to tell me when they're hitting someone or crying or whatever it is that they're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Abby. Did you want us to talk to the next slide?
We asked some of the educators to give us what conscious discipline meant to them, what it had done for them. So the next two slides are quotes from two of the educators in our centre. So Emma is in one of our toddler rooms, and then the next quote when we get to it.
Well, can I read Emma's out? Would that be okay?
Lovely.
So, conscious discipline has provided me with skills and techniques that consider every child's differing level of social and emotional development, ensuring no child is left behind. Implementing the strategies and approaches taught throughout the conscious discipline program has resulted in children who are more emotionally regulated, self-aware and certain. That's really profound. I just want to pause on that for a minute. I mean, that's extraordinary. Children who are more emotionally regulated, more self-aware and more certain. I mean, that's just such a huge gift to be giving children, isn't it? Educators feel confident in being assertive throughout their interactions. So just for those of you not familiar with conscious discipline, assertiveness is one of the skills. So each skill that we look at applies for educators, but also is taught to children. So assertiveness is one of the skills that educators learn in terms of how to use assertive communication with children, but also it's a skill that's very explicitly taught to children so they can learn to resolve conflict with each other. So educators feel confident in being assertive throughout their interactions and guidance of children's behaviours. Engagement with this program has been highly transformative in my role as an early childhood teacher, as I feel calmer and more composed. That's amazing, isn't it? As I role model and teach it each day. Lisa or Abby, did you want to say anything to that?
I would just like to say that what Emma has written there is definitely reflected in the room, especially being a toddler room. We all know what that can be like. It can be very challenging, but the change in both of our toddler rooms since we've started conscious discipline has been amazing. Just how calm the children are, how calm the educators are, and we've actually had parents do tours and comment on how calm the toddler space is, because that can be unusual.
Yeah, I was going to say calm and toddler space is not two words that are usually in the same sentence.
Not usually together, are they?
Okay, over to you, Abby and Lisa. Tell us, what does conscious discipline mean for children?
So we started conscious discipline early this year, I think around March.
Yep.
So we started by teaching the children about the brain and the states. We explained to them on the three conscious discipline brain states, which included the survival state, where they ask am I safe?
Yep.
Then the emotional state, am I loved?
Yeah.
They ask the question, am I loved? And the executive state, which is the optimal state, where they ask the question, what can I learn? So by understanding the brain states, children know why they are sad, upset, or frustrated, and they know how to manage those big emotions. So the brain states, we included it in the program, and we slowly incorporated all the things we wanted to teach the children. So after understanding all our emotions and the brain states, we shifted to the language of safety. So we started using the words not safe instead of saying not good or not nice. So when they do something like where they're climbing up the roof of the cubby house or something, we say, instead of saying that's not good, we say that's not safe. So now we use the language of safety. All the educators and even children and the parents are using the language of safety now. And in saying that, because now they know how to be safe and how to keep their environment and everyone safe, we can trust that they know what they're doing, that we know they're going to be safe. They know their boundaries and what behaviors are safe and appropriate. Yeah.
Can I just interrupt quickly there, Abby? Have you seen a reduction in what we might call challenging or difficult behaviours because the children are owning their responsibility and kind of keeping themselves safe and each other safe?
Yeah. Actually, it's been a huge change, because before we used to say, oh, don't climb up the chair because this might happen. But now we just say, this is, do you think that's safe? And they know, they just, oh, yeah, that's not safe.
Very powerful.
Yeah, and it makes our job easier. Like what you said before, we have more time to build those connections with them, because there's less time explaining to them what you can do, what you can't do, because now we know they can.
Yeah. And how satisfying for them to have those skills of that self-regulation and that impulse control. Yeah,
it builds their self-esteem as well, because they know we trust them.
And this is a quote from one of the parents in preschool 2 room.
Do you want to read that out, Lisa?
Wow, what a fabulous project you have been running with the children in this room on creating a safe place for them and teaching them about appropriate classroom behaviour. The idea of making daily commitments is fantastic. We have learnt so much about how the safe place can be used, what the daily commitments are, and also what being safe means. And I just need to say too, this child gets her family to make daily commitments before they leave home in the morning.
Yeah.
And they have built a safe place in the house as well, which has been amazing, that it's going from the centre into homes.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
Yeah.
And this is a comment from another parent.
Another parent, yes.
Do you want to read that out?
I want to express my special thank you to Lisa and educators in preschool 2 for all the hard work, particularly the program they've been undertaking under conscious discipline in action. In my experience, this has had a substantial influence on Bardia in controlling his emotions and being able to make himself relax. As a mum, I know teaching discipline to kids at this age is very challenging. However, educators with this scientific method make it work. I have seen changes in Bardia, but I did not know the reason until I watched the video and found out about the program. I believe it is a great accomplishment.
Congratulations. That's extraordinary feedback to be receiving, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do you want to talk then, Abby, about the safe place, because people might not know what that means?
Yeah. So our safe place is a physical space. We created it. We put it in the room, and children can access the safe place whenever they feel upset, frustrated, or sometimes when they just miss mom or dad, and they can access the safe place for them to manage their emotions, have some relaxing toys there. Actually, we started the safe place by asking the children what makes them feel calm and relaxed. So they came up with some ideas like books, squishy toys, blankets, pillows, sensory materials. So we added those in the safe place for the children to access. Our safe place is it's like a magical place because if one child goes in there upset, they come out happy and
that's magic.
Yeah, it's a magical place. And actually they know when to access it and how to access the safe place. They go there, they access all the items in there, they get a blanket, and after that they pack it up. And it's ready for another child to use.
That's really beautiful. What impact would you say it's had on children? So what I can hear, well, you haven't said it, but I know it's had a big impact on reducing challenging behaviours, because children are able to recognise when they're dysregulated and they've got tools for self-regulation. Yeah? what benefits do you think it's brought for the children? What would they say if we ask them?
So I think they just have this safe place. They know they have the safe place for them to use. Sometimes some of the children don't feel comfortable telling us what happened or why are they upset or why they're sad. So sometimes they just go like, oh, Abby, I'll just go in the safe place. And we go like, okay. And then after that, they come out saying, oh, I feel better now. It's just, we didn't want to force the children to tell us what happened. Yeah. So sometimes they just need that space. And because we have children from trauma background, service, one of the parents said they had to make a safe place at home because it really helped the child feel safe while it's in the safe place.
Fantastic. So I want to say two things. So even though we have done a lot of work about being trauma informed, I think you would agree that this helps all children and all educators, yeah? So I guess that's the first thing I want to say. This is not about a trauma specific program or something. It's a program that supports all children, including those who experience trauma. And the other thing I want to say, and I know we need to wrap up in a minute, but the other thing I want to say is I've talked about this, well, I haven't actually mentioned, there are seven very specific skills that we study. We study one each month. And the first skill is the skill of composure. And so we talk about how to help educators remain composed and, like Abby said, to access their brilliance, to remain calm and in what we call their executive state. But then there's a structure to support children to remain composed. And the safe place is the structure to support children to develop that capacity for self-regulation. It doesn't replace co-regulation. It doesn't replace the work educators do all the time in helping children feel calm, but it's an additional structure. And it's one of a number of many structures within conscious discipline that support the development of these social, emotional, and executive skills. Thanks, Abby. Lisa, did you want to talk about expected and unexpected challenges?
Yeah, this was around, Abby and I were having a conversation with Liam actually a few weeks ago, saying at the beginning of the year when we were told we would be doing conscious discipline, immediately we were all just like, oh dear, more training, how will we fit it in? You know, what will we get out of it? And then obviously we had the bushfires and then the pandemic, but it actually, you know, we were saying the other day, it's actually one of the positives to come out of the pandemic, because it all just ties together really beautifully in that children are going through so much this year. Their families are going through so much. So for us to be able to create safe places for them, help them regulate their emotions, it's actually been a brilliant time to incorporate.
Yeah.
And I think it's given them the skills as well to take home to their families who may have lost jobs, being stressed. And it's, I think, so it's one of the positives to come out of our year, and educators are so keen to have time off the floor, to watch the webinars, to just talk amongst themselves, attend your learning circles. I think it's been a really great bonding session across the board for our entire centre.
And I think it's also giving your educators those skills they've needed to to work through this difficult time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Did you want to wrap up by speaking to this slide?
That's you, Abby. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think conscious discipline is a very helpful tool for educators. I know I can say it's not an easy way to do. It's not easy because it requires for us to study and learn all the skills first. We have to remain calm ourselves first, and it needs consistency. So everyone should be on board. It's we're all in this together, and it requires lots of practice, because as the word it says conscious, we need to be consciously thinking about what language we're going to use, our actions, because they can see us. We can't say I'm calm, but then I'm like all over the place. Yeah, it's the way we present ourselves to the children. So we need to learn that first, and in order for us to teach conscious discipline to the children. And having conscious discipline in the center, like in all the Northside centers, has also helped us, because now educators know what, even if they move to different rooms, we have the same approach, so across all rooms and across all centers.
And we're using the same language.
Yeah,
as
we're using
well.
the language of,
so you can move anywhere
that,
throughout the building without an issue. And Abby and I were saying before too that you don't need to do conscious discipline and then just throw everything you've learnt from it in at once. It's a very slow, gradual.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Different parts of it relate to different age groups. As some of this you can't incorporate in nursery. So it's about taking parts of this and working with educators and the children in your room and coming up with a conscious discipline concept for your particular.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So just take whatever works for your room and just work on that.
Brilliant. Credit to you all.
We can't thank you enough, Beth.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Well, you know, I love working with you all, and you're making an extraordinary difference to children.
Wonderful. Well, that's a huge thanks to Lisa and Abby. So as everyone's seeing, we'll be able to see, it's very difficult for us to talk quickly about this stuff. It has had a dramatically huge impact across all of our centres. But I think what we'll probably do now is say thanks to Lisa and Abby, and Brian Wilby, our other centre directors are logging on, because we want to continue the conversation now with Beth, talking about the reflective supervision that Beth has been engaging with for a number of years now with centre directors. I'm aware we've probably got a little less time than we would like.
Fine.
We might hopefully have a bit of time for questions afterwards. But,
no problem, Liam.
I do want to thank Beth on behalf of Northside for all the work with conscious discipline, but Beth has been meeting with our centre directors once a month for 2.5 years now. I think.
Longer than that, I think.
Longer than that. Yeah. While everyone's logging on, Beth, we've, I should say, unfortunately, the Northside has picked today and yesterday to have significant IT dramas, which has made controlling the slides difficult. But while the centre directors are logging on and we're getting everyone ready, do you want to talk about reflective supervision, Beth? I think is maybe not a concept people in early education are familiar with. You're probably more familiar with maybe in health and social work and those kind of things.
Sure.
Give us a bit of a background to reflective supervision.
Yeah, so did you want to get rid of the conscious discipline slides if you can, Liam? I don't know what's happening at your end. There we go. Perfect. You've done a great job. Okay, so for those of you who've never heard of reflective supervision, so I'm a psychologist, and in the field of mental health, psychology, psychological well-being, social worker, that kind of field, we having what we call reflective or clinical supervision is just normal. So it's just really, really normal. Domestic violence, child protection, family support, all that sector, if you like. And what it means is that you meet with someone, usually external, once a month, and you discuss your work. You discuss yourself in your work. So I have my own supervisor that I meet with once a month to talk about myself and my work. And the purpose of supervision or reflective supervision is twofold. It's support and development. So it's support so that the director has that genuine, authentic experience of feeling supported in who they are and the work that they do, feeling visible, a space to reflect on the challenges and the successes of the work, because the work, as you all know, is so incredibly complicated. A chance to problem solve, a chance to think about themselves, their work, anything associated with their work. So it's that support, but also development. What skills do you need to be able to, face this challenge confidently? What resources can we at least connect you with, or just development in that process of critical reflection, the development that emerges out of that. How's that sound, Liam? Oh, Liam's disappeared. Liam, you're muted. Are the directors joining us?
I think that's good. We're still waiting for them to just unfortunately log on with our systems at the moment. But
all right, I can keep talking if you like.
I was going to say that's particularly fantastic is when you mentioned there a critical reflection. So where I think there's a great overlap with the requirements under the National Quality Framework is that idea about critically reflecting individually and in groups. For centre directors, that work is incredibly complex, and it is touching on a range of different things at different times. The idea that there's someone qualified and experienced, but maybe external to the organisation they're working on, where they can have conversations they would otherwise not be having, is definitely an important part of critical reflection. So, I mean, are you able to think about in terms of what that, I think particularly what's been amazing for us is that it's been such a long-term relationship. So it's not just that you're having these conversations once a month, having them once a month for so long. What difference do you think that kind of makes?
Yeah, so I guess I'd say something about that. I think, so the structure of supervision, to be clear, is it's like 1 hour, once a month, ongoingly. And what I think is really helpful about this structure is you don't have to have a problem to be accessing supervision. It's not like you have to wait for a problem to occur. It's like having that regular check-in, it makes a huge difference for directors between sessions, because you know if there's something that's going on, or you're feeling unsteady about something, or you've got a concern about something, you know that there's a session coming up next week, or in a fortnight, and you're able to discuss whatever's on your mind, and it's very broad. So I work hello Lisa.
Hello, I'm back. Can you see me?
I can't see. I can see Lisa.
I'm here too.
Everybody's there, Liam, but we just can't see them,
unfortunately.
All right, are they?
I can't see you either, Beth, but I'm here.
All right, can you turn your cameras on?
Camera on. They're on.
All right, okay, well listen, if you're there, why don't we get started with the discussion? Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So heard enough from me. So who we've got here, we've got Claire. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Beth.
Mary. Hi, Mary.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Mel.
Hi.
And Juliana.
Hi, Beth.
Perfect. Okay, so the 5 centre directors that I have been working with for a number of years. So you've heard me give a little bit of a background to what reflective supervision is. I'm going to hand over to you. How would you describe the process of supervision? If you had a new centre director starting and they'd never heard what's this thing called supervision, how would you describe the process of supervision?
Okay. I'll go first.
Okay, Juliana. Yeah.
I would say it's a process of learning how to keep going and being assisted in varieties of ways to enable you to positively keep going. And I think I look at it as a lighthouse. So supervision is more like a light beaming somewhere ahead where you can see, because every month that light's gonna shine and give you some information, support you in your development, as you mentioned before, develop in who you are, asking who you are, and strategies to assist you in what you do. So looking at this lighthouse, I would say, as leaders, as directors, there are times where we travel smoothly, calmly. I'll just use the ocean. We are on a ship and we travel calmly. And then there's moments where the sea's rough and the wind comes and we are sort of tossed around.
Yeah.
But we can see around us, there are other directors in the same situation as we are, traveling along this ocean, but we can still see the light ahead.
That's a really beautiful analogy, Juliana.
And we can at the same time reach out to each other and ask for support. I'm talking about the 5 directors that have gone through this supervision session with you, Beth. So we're able to reach out and ask for support. At the same time, too, we can see that light ahead and know that that time's going to come. And as you mentioned before, it's not only to do with all the problems that we are facing, it's also to share our success.
Yeah.
And to get some feedback of some of the things that we're doing. Are we on the right path?
Yeah.
And we get that reassurance and confidence when we have that session with you to know, yes, you are on the right path, or can I suggest something, add this to what you're already doing?
Yeah.
So that's how I would explain it to other directors. It's grab the opportunity if you can, if you are offered, because it have helped me so much. And I think that's one thing that I enjoy about what I do, having that supervision and also support from, you know, the area managers and Liam and all the other directors.
Yeah. That's so clear and succinct, and you really painted a really crystal clear picture. Thank you so much, Juliana. Mel, I might hand over to you. What would you say?
I would say I agree with Juliana, but I think what's really important about the supervision is it's hard to really define what it is, because it's guided by what each each director needs at that particular time.
Exactly right. So it's very much direct. I start with how are you? That's how we start each session, and then we just see what there is to discuss this month.
Yeah.
And I know I often have a list of what to talk to Beth about this month, and yeah, it's really guided by what we need, and because each of our centres are so different, we all have our own challenges and need help in different areas. So yeah, it's really hard to define exactly what it is.
Exactly right, because each month is different, isn't it?
Yeah, I've never had a supervision session that's the same as the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Mel. Claire, what would you say?
I would say that the supervision sessions with you are just an outlet to unpack all the various challenges that we face in our role as nominated supervisor. I don't think any of us could have prepared ourselves for the challenges and the complexities of this role. And sometimes I feel like I could really benefit from my own psychology degree with helping me navigate what we face every day in the centre, and having a trained psychologist to help us navigate these challenges has just been so valuable. And I don't think that I could do what I'm doing without you, Beth, and the support that you provide. So like Mel said, it varies so much, you know, what we unpack each month, but you always have a knack for sensing the different roads that we might need to go down in that session. And we just, I couldn't do this without our sessions.
Well, that's a pretty big call out, Claire. And I guess what I'd say to that is what's really interesting, just for everyone listening, it's 1 hour a month. Now, that's pretty big to think that 1 hour a month of holding, being seen, being supported, reflecting on successes and challenges makes such a profound difference to the other, 139 hours in the month or whatever it is, So, all right, Mary, thank you, Claire. Mary, what would you say?
I just have to agree with what both Juliana, Mel, everyone have said so far, and Claire. It's something that I look forward to, and again, unpacking the work that we do in our centres every day, with the opportunity to talk to you about, issues that arise in our roles as nominated supervisors. I just don't think we put enough emphasis on the responsibility that we have in our with children in our centres.
Yeah, it's enormous. Yeah. And I guess that's the other thing I just want to make really clear. It's about your work, but it's also about the person. So I'm very interested in how you are in your work and how the work is impacting on you and what you're bringing to the work. So, so those two elements I think are really, really key.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. Lisa, final word from you. If you're still there.
I think we've given Lisa a leave pass.
You've given Lisa a leave pass, fair enough. Liam, did you want to, I know we need to wrap up in a minute, did you want to say anything or add anything, or do any of the people we've spoken to so far have any final words?
Oh, look, I think, I mean, again, I know we sort of touched on this before, Beth, but a big thank you to you. It's always quite confronting, and having all the centre directors here knowing that, if I left Northside, I don't think anyone would care or even notice. But if we stopped hiring you, Beth, to do this work, there would probably be a riot on hand that would require the police to be called in. It has, from Northside's perspective, I mean, we have an incredible team of centre directors and educators working in centres, we are hugely aware of how complex and difficult and challenging that work is. Reflective supervision, from my understanding, and it's important to say, you know, I don't get that because I'm not doing that complex work. I don't have a legal responsibility as nominated supervisor. But the acknowledgement that that's how difficult the work is, and it is exactly as stressful, if not more, than a lot of the work that reflective supervision or clinical supervision is a requirement. I would actually argue that, you know, and I imagine the directors might agree, is that we probably can't do this work without you, Beth, and without that ability to be reflectively supervision. And one of the reasons we wanted to share this story, I think, with the sector is saying this should be an expectation that if you're going to do this work as a nominated supervisor, it is actually a requirement that this is the level of support that's provided. So thank you, Beth.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to work with you all. And thanks to the directors for being willing to come on and chat with me and share their experiences. That was very generous of you all.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
Thanks, Beth.
Always wonderful to see you. And so I can see a couple of questions in the chat box. I'll put in a couple of links in answer to a couple of the questions that people have asked, if that's okay. I think that's it from me.
Yeah. I know we've gone slightly over, but I think we'll be handing back to Wendy and Claire. But if there is any questions, we'd be happy to quickly take them.
Thanks, Liam. I think as we're a little bit over time, if you'd be happy to provide responses in writing, we can circulate those to the attendees.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. I'll hand you back to Wendy.
Lovely, thank you. And thank you so much, Northside, Liam, and your team for that presentation. I think as a provider, Northside are creating or developing, you know, a road ahead in terms of how can we actually support particularly nominated supervisors. I think it was very clear in that presentation the enormity of the role of the nominated supervisor and the actual need that they do have some support and support mechanisms in place. And what is happening at Northside is such a real example of support. It's not just a morning tea or a chat in the corridor. It's set down and it's, you know, a regular thing, and people can rely on that time to get that support. And I think that it speaks volumes about Northside and how much you care for your community. Juliana's simile around the storms that come along as a nominated supervisor, I think anyone that's held those positions, myself included, understands how those storms come and go and how brilliant it is to have somebody to help you clean up after those storms and to know where to go and how to grow. So a big thank you. So, and especially a thank you to all of the people who contributed, all the directors from Northside. So I'd like to thank all of our guest speakers for sharing their expertise with us today, and thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day to attend this meeting. Before you leave, I encourage you to keep up to date with Children's Education and Care Assurance you can do things like signing up to receive emails, updates, the Talking Quality publications, and information about professional development opportunities. Please also like and follow our Facebook page as we publish regular updates and helpful information relevant to the education and care sector. The Education Directorate website can also be helpful for information and resources such as the Talking Quality publications that appear at that website. So that's it for us for today, and I'd like to especially acknowledge Kylie, our comms person who has put this together. It's our first attempt at a meeting in Zoom, or not Zoomland, in digital world. And I think that Kylie has worked incredibly hard to bring it all together and to make it successful. So well done, Kylie. And I do wish you all the best as we move on through 2020.